starting on Luke 14. Now it happened as he went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath that they watched him closely. And behold, there was a certain man before him who had dropsy. And Jesus, answering, spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? But they kept silent. And he took him and healed him and let him go. Okay, rulers of the Pharisees, where he's at, these are people who are not too terribly bothered or excited by the latest Messiah. Jesus was not the only person who came claiming to be the Messiah, and actually he didn't openly claim to be the Messiah, but everybody thought that he was the Messiah, and in fact he was, but he was very careful about proclaiming that. But there had been lots of people up to this point who had come saying, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Messiah. And these guys, the rulers of the Pharisees, were the people who were responsible for dressing them down and keeping the people from all going crazy over the latest prophet slash Messiah who is presenting themselves. So they're taking a crack at Jesus now. So they invite him there and watch him closely to see what it is that he does that they can say this is a false prophet because he this and this. This is their usual and really what they're supposed to do, because they're responsible for the people of Israel not getting led off astray into this direction or that direction by any false prophet that might come into their circle. So they're being responsible leaders in doing this. Behold, there was a certain man before him who had dropsy. Just happened to be before him. Dropsy.
What's that?
Dropsy is a disease where fluid builds up in the tissues and the whole body swells. It makes your arms and limbs full of fluids and fat, and it's painful. We don't call it that really now, but it was regarded by the Pharisees as a punishment for immorality. So this particular disease
How do
was.
they know that? Why do they choose that?
Why does anyone choose it?
Yeah.
Here's something, let's make a reason for it.
Yes. It was regarded as the one of many punishments for immorality, and really, most diseases they regarded as a punishment for immorality of some sort. If you act bad, then you get sick. And even when like the blind man came and he said, whose sin is it that caused this man to be blind? Was it his or his parents? It's just this idea that sickness is caused by sin.
Like Job, you did something wrong.
Yes, you did
What
something
did you
wrong.
do?
Exactly.
And you know what? I think that didn't only happen then. It still happens now. I know back in my country, it's very much that sort of thinking when it comes to...
What did you do?
Yeah. When people get sick, it's like, oh, it must be God's punishment.
Because we have this concept that if we are good, then,
only good things will ever happen.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
us.
We're good people.
Yeah.
It's not about that at all, though.
Yeah. So the fact that this man was before him indicates that Jesus couldn't really help but notice him. So what was he doing there? What is this guy who is...
Placed.
Yes, he was strategically placed. They didn't just invite this person who is being punished for his immorality to this banquet of the
It's too circumstantial.
upper class, where they're gonna... I was going to say crucify the Messiah, but that's a little bit ironic, where they're going to put this new Messiah to shame. Yes. So it really does give the impression that this man was being presented as an object lesson, as a way of tripping up Jesus, and really just kind of being presented almost like a slave for auction type thing. Here's this guy. Let's everybody stare at him. Humiliating that they would be doing this in order to set up Jesus. So they're using this guy as a pawn to and we don't know what his idea was of being used this way, if he volunteered for this because it was a chance to get close to Jesus and be healed. That's a possibility.
He could just be there for food.
It could just be there for yes, yes. Or they could have, compelled him in some way. We don't know. So he says, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So Jesus answering spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees. So he's answering the lawyers and the Pharisees. He's answering the people who presented the man who has the dropsy. So he knows this is a setup. Suddenly this guy is here. He knows what's going on, and he's answering what's going on. So, of course, they can't say yes, they can't say no. So they have to keep silent. There was a discrepancy, again, between oral and written law. The Talmudic law, the oral law, had implemented countless rules and regulations about Sabbath and what could and couldn't be done. And we know that it shows up over and over again. So by oral law, it was not lawful to heal on the Sabbath. But by written law, Mosaic law, it was absolutely lawful. So you have this discrepancy between the two. With the oral law, it was legal if the person was in immediate danger of death. But if it was anything chronic, as in you'll live till tomorrow, no worries, you could not heal on the Sabbath.
When they say healed, does that mean like doctors?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, any kind
It's
of,
like they kind of just have like
medical.
people coming through and like miraculously healing everybody all the time.
There actually were professional healers that would come through. It was their job to do.
Yeah.
So Jesus being a healer was not really, I mean, to us, we go, wow, but we have doctors. Their doctors were their healers.
Yeah. that's what
And
they
they did use means by which people didn't understand. So
So it was obviously there were other circumstances that somebody would be healed,
yes.
not just saying, otherwise why would there be a law?
Yeah. So they can't answer. So Jesus heals him and then sends him on his way, not letting him stay to be made a spectacle anymore. He's like, okay, you're healed, now go. No, we're
I
not
wonder if
gonna.
that means like his arms just shrank and then like he walked out, or
Oh.
he woke up the next day and was like,
Well, he took him and healed him. Past tense. He did this and then it was done. And let him go. Okay. And then verse 5. Then he answered them, saying, which of you, having a donkey or an ox that has fallen into a pit, will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day? Does anybody have anything different other than a donkey or an ox?
Child.
I have an ass.
Child. Ass, yeah.
Son or a cow.
Son. Yep. Donkey, we have two different sets of manuscripts. Half of them say donkey, half of them say son. Different manuals say different things. Likely, there was actually an original Aramaic play on words here. A son, bara, and an ox, beira, and a well, bara.
I guess. They take out all the vowels, don't they?
Yes, they take out all the vowels. So it's the BR, the BR, in the BR.
How confusing. And they say English is hard.
Little play on words there. It was likely a son first. So the force of it is, if your son, or even your ox, or your cow, falls into a well, what do you do about it on the Sabbath? I mean, do you just leave your kid there? And ironically, there is this exact scenario is discussed in the Midrash. Okay, so if you think of the Midrash, the oral law, if you think of it as a collection of case laws, okay, and in the legal world, you've got statutory law and then you've got case law. And your statutory law is what's written on the books, and that is the law. But your case law is what interprets the statutory law. So when you have a statutory law and you have to figure out if what your client as a lawyer is doing is legal, or what is there a foundation on which you can precedent on which you can build a case that this was legal or this is illegal or this is, whatever. You look at all the different cases that have appealed to that law, and if it's been proven in the past and won in the past, you can use that as influence for the judge to say, hey, this is the case and this is what the judge ruled, and this, we're going to appeal to this. So you have your written law and then you have your case law. Okay, so in the case law, in the Midrash, and how it's been interpreted in past years. So the mild ruling, the judge who ruled kind of mildly, allows for the animal to be helped out of a pit. The harsh ruling only allows for provision of fodder into the pit. So you can't get the horse or the ox or the cow out of the cistern like a well. You can't get it out, but you can throw some hay down there for it so it doesn't die overnight. And as far as what you do with a man, like the Qumran community out in the desert, living out there, very ascetic lifestyles, they allowed a man to be pulled out as long as no implements were being used. If you had to use an implement, like a rope, to pull the man out of the pit, he had to stay there.
It was fastest work, I suppose.
Yeah. An animal was not allowed to be pulled out under any circumstances, but a man could be pulled out as long as you could do it with your own hands and you didn't have to use like a rope or anything like that.
Oh my goodness.
Because if you have to use
They
rope,
so happy with themselves.
then just throw him down a sandwich because he's going to be there till tomorrow.
I wonder how many people fell down wells in order for this to be a thing.
Yeah. It must have.
Like a lot?
Animals might have. Yeah, maybe.
So,
Imagine trying to live with like, okay, what can I do and what can't I do? Like,
yeah.
what can I do? Can I do this? Can I not do this? Do your head in, like.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fact that there are legal, there are laws about this, there are rules about this, like if these are actually case laws at any point, a lot of it was probably a bunch of rabbis sitting around and talking. Quite frankly, that's how they spent their time. They hypothesized about this, that, and the other thing. And then they argued amongst themselves and debated it to decide whether or not things should be lawful. If these are actually case laws, if any of these situations actually came up, it does make you go, oh my gosh, that this could have actually happened to somebody, that they were prosecuted for helping their son out of a well, because
We just do a quick look over your shoulder. Is anyone watching?
yeah.
Yeah, you would, but then everybody else is out to get you. Like,
Yeah, you're very, very
Like the
Just
little
think about
birdie.
like our law. Like, we don't know all our laws.
yeah.
Like, couldn't even know like.
well, apparently you're not allowed to pee in the Spanish Sea. It's against the law.
Okay.
But how are you gonna know? I don't know.
Exactly.
How is this I read like a whole heap of random laws. It's really, really random. That's one of them. You can't pee in the Spanish Sea. Like, how are they gonna know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. Then you get caught out. It's like the whole first aid thing. Like, you can be sued for helping somebody.
Yeah.
Australia
does a pretty good job of making the laws so minuscule, micromanaging everybody. In the laws that, yes, there are laws that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a law. And you find out that it's a law and you go, how am I ever supposed? I would have never thought that
apparently
could
there's
ever
a
be a
law
law.
that you're not allowed to send your kids to school. They're not allowed to walk to school without a parent or guardian under the age of 12.
Yeah.
And yet, every day we see kids without parents
I
or
had
caregivers on their way to school and nobody pulls them up. So there's laws.
I
and
had
then
the
there's
police
culture.
come to my door and tell me that it was too far for my children to walk 200 meters in front of the school. I had to actually walk them to the gate.
When?
Just recently at Central, yes.
Really?
Because I'd walk them past the last crossing, the last street crossing, so that they wouldn't have to cross the street by themselves, and I'd kiss them and let them go. And they were right in front of the school, so they just have to walk along the fence to get there. And the police actually came to my door and threatened to charge me with a misdemeanor for allowing my children to walk along the fence in front of the school into the school. Yes, it does happen.
Really?
That's actually the one that I was thinking of, and I'm just going, it never would have occurred to me that would be a law.
Well, see, the only reason we knew was because we were trying to figure out when we could leave Mercy at home by herself.
Mm.
And yeah, I see kids at Calliope especially, they walk to the school all the time with nobody there.
And I
And
think
I
that's
never
perfectly
thought- I
fine.
never thought a
When
cop
I
would
lived
do
at
it.
West, because where in Kent Street,
Yeah.
and Gabby goes to West, there's a girl that lived across the road, and she would ride her bike from there to school, to West
fair
from
way.
Kent Street to, and I was always like, I don't know how her parents just.
Yeah, you see these.
It
little
depends on the
things,
child.
Like, these little things, riding their bikes to
Yeah.
school.
In Japan, they get a little flag at 2 years old, and they cross the streets and they put up this little flag, and everybody stops for them. The whole country looks out for little guys.
8 years old in New
totally
York
different
City
for
to
here.
ride the subways by yourselves.
That's
I mean-
crazy. I never thought anybody got in trouble for it, because I was like, obviously people are doing this all the time. I did not think people would get in trouble, so that really surprised me that you got a call or a visit.
Yeah, we had a discussion about what the definition. I had to actually go and look up the law and find out what the
somebody dob you
precedent
in?
was for it. I'm sorry.
Did somebody dob you in?
The police drove by and saw the children walking.
And
So
you didn't see
they-
anybody else? Did you
they-
question anyone else's kids walking to school?
Oh. But yeah, no, it caused some drama. So yeah, I'm prepared for it next time because I still let my kids walk that distance, because eventually we're going to be going back to America and they're going to have to know how to get themselves up, ready for school, out the door, walk to the bus stop, get on the bus, drive them, get to school, get off the bus, get into the school, get back into the bus, go back home, come home from the bus stop. They're going to have to know how to do all that in kindergarten in America. So like, 200 meters to the front door of the school is reasonable distance for them. It depends on the kid too. Like I wouldn't let them.
And they're together.
Yes, and they're together, and that's a big issue for me. Like that's not one child by themselves. There's two children, and if anybody pulls up with a car and says, "Hey, come see my puppy," one of those kids is going to be bashing the other kids, going, "You stupid idiot! You're going to get us both in trouble. Let's go." So, anyways.
Wow, that's crazy. I did not know that.
Okay, verse 6. They could not answer him regarding these things. So he told a parable to those who were invited when he noted how they chose the best places. Luke calls this a parable, but it has a lot of parallels in Jewish wisdom literature, and it may have actually even been a secular saying that got adapted to Jesus to teach him something about the kingdom. In the time of Jesus, the seating at a dinner, these big dinner parties were quite popular among the upper class, and the seating depended on the rank and distinction of the guest. So after about AD 300, so 300 years later, it would depend upon age rather than social status. But at this point, it was depending upon social status. So the most important guests were expected to arrive late, and there would be this
That
sort
was
of
me. You're
procession
welcome.
procession as they went to their seat. And the top place at a Jewish meal was either at the head of the table or at the middle of the middle couch, depending on how it was set up. So they chose the best places. These people who were invited chose the best places. And he said, "When you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him, and he who invited you and him come and say to you, 'Give place to this man.' And then you begin with shame to take the lowest place." Yeah. "But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when he who invited you comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, go up higher.' Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself, oops, just lost my place, will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. There is a very well-known scholar named Rudolf Bultmann. You may have heard me mention him before. He was very, very influential in the way that we read the Bible today as scholars and the way that we look at the historical aspects of who Jesus was. And he absolutely slams this text and says that this could never have been something that Jesus had actually said, because this type of false humility could have never been on the lips of Jesus. How would you answer that if somebody came and said to you, this can't possibly be something that Jesus would have said because of this false humility, and this is so completely not Jesus in the rest of the text? How do you respond to that in your view of Scripture?
But hasn't Jesus always said, like,
Always
be a
humble
servant?
yourselves.
Yeah, be a servant first. And he himself, like he said, he didn't
He
come to
washed
put him.
the people's feet.
Yeah. So when you read that, I wouldn't
I
think
don't-
it's
what's
out of
his-
character for God to say something
I'd
like
ask
that.
for reasoning. Like, why are you saying that Jesus wouldn't say this when it says he did say this?
Well, and yeah, is it a false humility?
But
Is
Jesus
it because you know that you're going to, you know that you
well, then
deserve
what
better,
about
that
the
you
first
could
shall be
put-
last and the last shall be first? Does that not tie in exactly to this?
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
he not say that also? Or is he saying he didn't say that?
He would probably say that he didn't say that either, but that's where I would go with it as well. That's exactly where I would go with it as well. That it's not necessarily a false humility, because elsewhere he reinforces the idea of be the servant.
I'm like a church just gone, blessed to be like you're blessed to be a blessing.
Yeah.
And like you fork out and you get a blessing in return. Like it's pretty much everything Jesus talks about. I
Yeah.
don't see why it would be false in any way.
Yeah. Well, and the idea being that, when you're invited, you go and sit down in the lowest place and then expecting that somebody is going to come and put you up into a higher place. When he who invited you comes, may say to you, friend, go up higher, and then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you.
I guess in some ways you could see it as a
Hmm.
I know that I'm not supposed to sit here, but I want to be seen as humble.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to be
want-
escorted to the
yeah, like I
higher
can see
place.
that side of it, but I can also see the reasoning behind it, as in, hey, if you don't know that you're the top dog until the guy says, hey, you're top dog, then
Yeah.
why not? It doesn't, I don't know, I would, when it says the lowest place, I would just think lower.
Mm.
Like it's not like you're an honorary guest, right? It's not like you're going to go and sit in a space that you were never supposed to sit at. Like I would just not probably sit in the top spot.
Well, it says go sit down in the lowest place. When you are invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when who invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, go up higher. Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Maybe it's like more towards how God wants you not to think lower of yourself, but to always have that humble attitude. I guess, to have that approach that, maybe somebody else who's higher ranking than me will come along, and so I'll just.
Yeah.
or just that there's always somebody who's more worthy than you are,
Yeah.
or could be.
And that you serve them regardless.
Yeah,
you know,
but I
you
guess
serve-
the whole and then you'll be exalted in front of the crowd. I guess that.
You gotta
kind
look
of-
at who he's talking to as well. You
well,
know,
yeah,
he's talking
that's
to
appealing,
people,
isn't
I
it?
think.
When you're
Yeah.
yeah.
Verse 11, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he also said to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. Does this mean you shouldn't ever throw a party?
Don't invite your friends.
Don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, your rich neighbor. Because if they invite you back, you'll be repaid.
He said
Sorry.
that to them.
Sorry,
okay.
guys, no more invites.
So who is he saying that? Well, who is he saying like?
But verse 13, but when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind. Incidentally, like that man that you dragged here before me to, invite him to.
So
Eat.
basically, don't invite somebody to your house because you pretty much know you're guaranteed to be invited to their house. Invite someone who's not guaranteed to invite you back.
Yeah.
Somebody who actually needs
He won't have the
the
means.
invitation.
Yeah. But does it mean you shouldn't throw a party?
No,
No.
No. It's totally missing the point.
means Haley needs to do another one.
You need to have two.
And I will not repay you if you like that.
When you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. So if you invite a friend to dinner, you expect them to invite you to their house next time. If the friend you're inviting is a stranger, you have no idea whether they'll do the same. But if you're inviting somebody who's homeless, it's a pretty good bet they're not going to invite you to their home for dinner. So, yeah.
Oh, and they could have a cardboard box.
Okay, so now the way that this is written, you gotta picture the scenario. Jesus has now insulted everybody sitting at the table,
Well done.
and then he insulted his
Guest.
host. Yes. So he's gone full circle and insulted the entire room. So now there's this big long awkward silence. And so somebody says, now one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, and he said to him, "Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God."
Is that the awkward person?
Yeah. Let's just break this awkward silence and say, hey, what about that messianic banquet? That'll be awesome. Everybody can agree on that. We've been talking about messianic banquet for years and years, and everybody agrees it's going to be a wonderful, amazing day, and we're all going to rejoice, and everything's going to be great.
Is that right?
And then he said to him, yeah, he's not ready to let it go yet. So a certain man gave a great supper and invited many. In light of the statement that we just had, we're probably thinking messianic banquet. So this innocuous comment that he made that everybody could agree on, Jesus has now taken it and said, okay, let's talk about that. In Matthew's version, the host is actually a king who holds a marriage feast for his son. Probably that detail was added there rather than omitted here, because here we clearly see where this is going.
Is that the one where nobody wants to come, and so he says, "Go and invite all the poor and homeless"?
Yeah. So same thing here. He sent his servant at supper time to say to those who are invited, "Come, for all things are now ready." So this will be the second time that the servant is coming to them. The first time the servant came to them, he invited them all, and presumably they all RSVP. Because he goes again the second time several weeks or days later, and everybody's changed their mind.
Yeah.
Which is a point that's often overlooked. He's not going out and saying, okay, I want to throw a feast, drop everything and run. He came, he said, I'm going to have a party. The people said, yeah, we'll be there. And then he throws the party and says, okay, it's time now. And then they say, oh, we're busy. Sorry.
Where does it say it was the second time?
He sent his servant, in verse 16, certain man gave a great supper and invited many. So he would have sent out the invitation and sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited previously, come, for all things are now ready.
Mm-hmm.
But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, I've bought a piece of ground and I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask that you have me excused. Still another said, I've married a wife, and therefore I can't come.
That must have been quick.
Yeah.
Could have brought her along.
Oh, I know that would have been against the rules.
Interestingly, all 3 of these excuses bear a resemblance to Deuteronomy 25-7 for why someone can't go to war.
Is it a legit? Oh.
They're valid excuses.
Okay. It sounds really odd. What a piece of land. I just want to go and view it.
Well, no.
Couldn't do it
There-
any other day except the day that you
Shouldn't
need
he
to
have
come.
viewed it before he bought it?
I forgot I was marrying a wife on that day, so hey, sorry, you can't come now. It doesn't make any sense.
The guy, there are valid excuses. The guy must go see the ground that he bought. The Greek word for the must implies that there's a legal obligation as part of a sale transaction. So he's bought this, and now in order to finish the transaction, he's got to go do it. He must, or else the
It just sounds
transaction
funny
is
to us.
null and void. Yes. The guy who bought 5 yoke of oxen, well, he must have a pretty big farm in order to need 5 yoke of oxen, because 1 or 2 would have been sufficient for the average farmer. And as in the former case, he's also legally required to complete the sale. He must go test these oxen. It's part of the sale, the transaction. And so he's got to do that. The third guy doesn't even ask to be excused. He just says, nope, gonna sleep with my wife tonight rather than party with y'all. And ironically, we'd be inclined to say that this is the responsible or even ethical thing to do, because who knows what's going to be going on at this party. And if he just married a wife like that day, you don't leave your wife that you just married and go run off to a party with the guys. So we would say, yeah, go for it. You should do that. And actually, there was a precedent in the law that, you know, when you just married a wife, you spend time with your wife, and that's what you do. You're even excused for war. So, 21, that servant came and reported these things to his master. And the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. Message of not letting possessions or relationships with people get in the way of your willingness to follow God, or follow him, for that matter. Go sell everything that you have and come with me. Oh, let me go bury my father first. Let the dead bury their own dead. He's very, when he calls you, you come. It doesn't matter what your obligations are, what your property obligations are, what your relational obligations are. You come. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there's room. Then the master said to the servant, go out into the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper. Usually, this sort of banquet has these eschatological overtones to it, these, end of the world type overtones. But significantly, this time, the verb form that's used, it's something that's happening right now. So come, because this is already followed by refusal and a plan B. So the eschatological picture, if you will, is one of salvation in the present and not the future. So it's like, you do this now. This is not something that's going to happen in the future where you can, where it's going to matter. It matters right now. Nobody who's invited is going to taste my supper. There's a precedent that has been set in the Old Testament, Nehemiah, chapter 8, 10 through 12, where parcels of food would get sent to invited guests who could not attend. So we don't know that this is the actual way that things were always done, but there was certainly a cultural precedent for it. It could have been the cultural practice of the time, and it could have been what was expected by the people as they were refusing the invitation. But this is not going to happen.
So what he did was pretty radical.
Yeah, you're not getting the feast unless you respond to the invitation, even if it makes the master socially unacceptable. Even if he is being viewed as somebody who is being too harsh in not respecting these valid reasons to not come. If he's being unkind in that he is not sending food to those who could not come, he's furious and he's done, and he doesn't care if it's socially acceptable or not. Ooh. So he's now managed to, of course, ostracize everybody in the room.
It's just a story, though, right?
I'm sorry?
Parable.
Yeah. Well, this is a parable that he's telling in response to the awkward silence being interrupted by,
yeah.
"Hey, that messianic banquet. We can all talk about that and all agree that that's going to be cool."
Somebody was trying, sounds like Jason. Trying to build, I know, I'll just make everybody like each other again.
Yes. Yes. That didn't
That
work.
work.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, verse 25. Now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." So now we have the opposite end of the spectrum. Those who respond to the invitation but don't consider the cost. Going back to the example of the previous parable that was being used. So how does this tie into the last parable? We had those who refuse, and they're not getting any food. They're getting excused from the messianic banquet. Y'all aren't invited anymore, and you're not going to partake. But these people that do respond need to understand that what Jesus is offering is more important than the land and the oxen and the wife and any obligations to them. It's even more important than the obligation to one's aging parents, which is really big deal. It's not socially acceptable to neglect any of those things. You don't neglect your land. You don't neglect your transactions that you're in the middle of carrying out, and screw the people that you're trying to buy from or sell to. You don't do that. You don't neglect your wife. You don't neglect your parents. It's not something that we would ever condone from the outside looking in. And in fact, many, many, many sermons have been preached and had at that time been preached on the importance of fulfilling these obligations in a spirit of love. You fulfill these obligations. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to love these people and do these things. And all of that is very much the point. God trumps all things, including the things that he tells you to do. The general rules that are in existence with very good reason, the rules that are there, that are the very important social structure rules of Christianity, where we value things in our Christian culture, he can trump even those things. Like, just for example, marriage. He can trump a marriage. He can tell you to leave your spouse. If there is something there that he doesn't want the two of you to be together, there's a valid reason for it. He can tell you to divorce. It's not something he does regularly because he hates divorce, and he says, this is the way that I designed it. You have a marriage. It's a covenant. You don't break it. But he's still bigger than even that. He is, and to the point where he can say, if you come to me and do not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, in your own life also, you cannot be my disciple. Hate is one of those words in our English language where hate is the opposite of love, and it's like despising. It's not like that. It's just not showing the Matthew tones it down. Matthew tones it down to, if you don't love me more than you love all of these. But Luke maintains what's probably the original, the more extreme. It's not hate is not a psychological or an emotional thing in this. We think of hate as being sort of an emotional issue. It's the sense of renunciation. It's the same thing with any property. God gave me this, God can take it away. God gave me everything that I have, he can take it away. God gave me my life, he can take it away. It's his. And it is a bit scary in a way because it leaves you in this position of you really have to trust God even for things that you think can be forever. And chances are that they will be because God does not just want to jerk you around for the hell of it. This is not just, he's not just gonna, you know, decide to turn your life upside down unless you're Job. But even then, he didn't just do it because it would be fun. He had a purpose in what he did, and Job benefited from it.
So basically, it says, if I'm not number one in your life, you can't be my disciple.
Yeah. Yeah. Even above all of your social responsibilities. And let me tell you, people who would walk out on their father and mother, their aging father and mother, and leave their wife and children and follow Jesus as his disciple, like Peter probably did,
Right.
they were despised culturally. Like their culture, their families, I mean, they would have just been completely ostracized. Like, how dare you? You are the worst of the worst. And you know, we hear today about people who do this sort of thing, and our immediate reaction, and I think rightfully so, our immediate reaction is, how could you do that? You know, people who leave their wife and children and go run off and do a ministry. Our immediate reaction to that is, how could you do that? That's wrong. And I think the fact that that is our immediate reaction is kind of the point. I think that's a good immediate reaction. I think that's because part of the sacrifice that you're making, if God tells you to do something so drastic like that, part of the sacrifice that you're making is the fact that you are forever going to be branded as somebody who does this. And that you're forever going to be questioning, even if you're not questioning, but you're going to have other people that are questioning and saying, you know, well, how do you know God told you to do that? Mm-hmm. And that's part of what you have to bear, and you have to deal with. It's part of the cost, because yeah, it's no light thing. Who's going to take care of the father and mother? Who's going to take care of your wife and your children? Who's going to take care of these things that you're not taking care of? Mm-hmm. If God told you to do it, he's got another plan. There is somebody else there who's going to take care of those things. But you are going to have to answer to society for the fact that it's not you when it should be, mm-hmm. and when everybody everywhere knows that it should be. Mm-hmm. You know, so part of what you're enduring as this disciple is not only that you've lost these people and these things in your life, but your own life also. Hate your own life also. Renounce your own life also. Renounce your reputation as the person who does the right thing. Because that also is on the table for God to trump. Whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And even when you've stripped away everything and all you have left is the obligation to take care of yourself, then die, because I'm more important than life itself. This is very extreme. Now, because God loves families, because he loves us, and because we know it's in his heart and his general will to keep families strong, it's likely that the actual walking out of this message will be along the lines of, follow me and do what I say. Okay, now I say that you need to take care of your family because that's my will. The actual, how this actually walks out is probably going to be that way, because that's, God's already made it clear that he loves families. And if he gives you a family, he expects you to take care of it. But don't presume to put any action or relationship and priority above God, because everything you do and every relationship you have is out of relationship with him, and he's not something to be slotted into your day. So verse 28, I'm trying to get through this before I really and truly run out of time in about 6 minutes. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. So the lesson is, don't start what you can't finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not also sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. This ask conditions of peace is a literal translation of the Greek, which is probably representing the Hebrew idiom shalal b'shalom. Sha'al b'shalom, which is literally to greet in peace. But what the idiom means when you greet in peace in this situation, figuratively, it's to do homage or surrender unconditionally. So it's not just asking conditions of the peace, it's unconditional surrender. Please don't slaughter me. So likewise, whichever one of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Literally, if the salt has become foolish and imbecilic, there is clearly a nuance here that has been lost to us because we don't know how a salt can be foolish or stupid. But yes, there's something there. Matthew and Luke agree against Mark, so this was probably a separate saying. There is a lot of speculation. How can salt lose its flavor? Palestinian salt was obtained from the Dead Sea. Evaporation produced salt crystals. And also it produced this other bitter tasting crystal called carnallite, which could easily be mistaken for salt crystals. So you've got salt crystals, and then you've got this other stuff that looks like salt crystals that it's not salt. It tastes really bad. So that's how salt, you could have salt that has lost its flavor. You have salt that's not salt, actually.
But if they said not salt, we'd be like, huh?
Yeah.
And pepper. Just kidding.
An interesting note, a rabbinic story that is attributed to a rabbi in AD 90, somewhere around in there, states that salt can no more easily lose its flavor than a mule can bear a foal, which is probably a saying based on the date of it. It was probably actually a saying that was directly reflecting on this saying of Jesus. So he's directly opposing the saying of Jesus. It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So that is Luke chapter 14. A couple of tangents in there. But we got there.